Everywhere on YouTube I see videos of free DAWs that are not actually free. They have major limitations or they are trial versions of paid DAWs. So I thought, let's make a video with the top 5 of the best free DAWs out there that are really free without any limitation. In this video, a top 5 of the best free DAW software for music production. But before we can continue, let's define the rules of that top 5. My set of rules are, first of all, paying may be optional, but it's not obligated to use the software. Number 2, it has no limitation in the number of tracks. Number 3, you can use third-party plugins. Number 4, you can use the software without a time limit. And number 5, it has to be actually usable as a DAW. The table of contents, by the way, is in the description below. To be honest, I found only 4 free DAWs that I could actually test that fit within that set of rules. I was inclined to set on number 5 Garageband, but Garageband, although it's usable, it has a limitation of 32 tracks and 4 effect plugins per track, so I chose something I could not test because it's for Windows. I heard good stories about this DAW, and on place number 5, Cakewalk. Cakewalk was previously known as Sonar, something to do with a takeover. Judging by the scarce information on the website is that it's completely free without any limitation on tracks or whatever, and I saw it supports VST plugins. On spot number 4, T7. T7 by Tracktion is available for Mac, Windows and Linux. You are greeted with a nag screen, but if you click unlock and enter your user credentials, you can continue. It's worth mentioning that the DAW makes no distinction between audio and MIDI tracks. There are no limitations in the number of tracks in T7, and yes, you can use third-party plugins. You can even add a video for scoring film music. There are a couple of plugins in the software, like a sampler, and a couple of effect plugins like a compressor. The software sometimes doesn't respond to mouse clicks, and sometimes a right click on a plugin opens a menu and sometimes a plugin. And I had it crash on me once by adding a plugin. I did a dedicated video on T7, check out the link in the description. On spot number 3 in my top 5 best free DAW software for music production, LMMS. LMMS, or Linux Multimedia Studio, is available for Linux, Windows and Mac. LMMS supposedly took inspiration from FL Studio and should be easy to understand when you are switching from that platform. However, I don't know FL Studio, so I can't say for sure, and I was struggling quite a bit to get started. I needed at least 6 or 7 tutorials. The samples and instrument plugins you can find on the left in LMMS. Also the presets for the instrument plugins you can find here. Effect plugins you can add to the instrument effects chain in the plugin window. The rest is a window within a window. So the timeline is a window called the song editor. There's a separate window for the mixer, and there is a separate window for the piano roll. And there is a separate window for the step sequencer. The multiple window interface doesn't work well for me. I'm constantly dragging windows out of the way and closing them, and that's especially time consuming on a small 13-inch laptop screen with a trackpad. It's possible to do sidechaining, but it's a bit cumbersome by sending it to an effects channel that you have to connect to a controller and rename that controller if you find it later, or am I missing something here? Automation is also possible in LMMS. You have to add an automation lane and an automation block on the timeline. Open the automation window and drag and drop a knob from your synthesizer or so to the window. That dragging and dropping the knob I like, otherwise I have to search for a parameter in a long list. I've noticed some user interface issues with LMMS, like not updating the user interface while playing. Or the fight of being the on top of everything window when the automation window is open. You can't open other software, it is immediately pushed to the background. and hints like use Control and drag and use the middle mouse button are meant for Linux and Windows, but do not apply for Mac users. That is confusing to say the least. By the lack of knowledge of the My Documents folder and the Music folder, or not saving to the last folder you used, or not being able to scroll horizontally in the file browser, you see the non-optimized multi-platform nature of the software. Or the fact that horizontal and vertical scrolling applies to the whole workspace, instead of only the song editor. That is unnecessary time consuming. MIDI keyboards are supported and supposed to work in LMMS, although I couldn't get mine to work. LMMS can export WAV and OGG lossless file formats, and it can export stems, so multiple tracks at once. WAV, AIFF and FLAG for importing is supported, but regretfully MP3 is not. The software supports partial VST plugin support under Windows and supports the Linux Audio Developers Simple Plugin API, or LADSPA for short. That results in a slew of really simple plugins in the software with limited functionality. Since using your own VSTs or AUs won't work, you have to rely on what they provide for you. One thing I definitely have to point out is the lack of recording features. You can get around that by using Audacity, for example, but that makes LMMS not a one-stop free DAW. The professional music producer in the end will miss some features like traction detection, for example. But the tool is okay, besides the user interface issues. You are watching the top 5 best free DAW software for music production. On place number 2, Soundbridge. Soundbridge is available for Mac and Windows. The Soundbridge DAW is free if you donate, as this next screen carefully explains. File saving and opening are on the bottom, as are the transport controls. The plugins you can find on the left, and you can drag and drop them on a track. Which plugins are applied to a track you can find on the right. Also, the sample browser is on the left, and you can drag and drop samples directly to your track. The mixer is on the bottom, but also it's possible to have a huge mixer in the middle. The Soundbridge DAW is pretty straightforward, and I think you'll pick up very quickly. The software is responsive and you can change bit rates of sound card inputs, although it's very basic. To save CPU you can freeze a track, but freezing a track is a bit cumbersome in Soundbridge. You have to set the settings explicitly and select your tracks from a long list every time you freeze. It could be improved, but it's workable. Automation is also a bit cumbersome. You have to draw in an automation lane on an existing automation lane and change the values in the lower editor. You can't click the points directly on the timeline. Audio stretching and pitch shifting is very easy in the edit window, if Soundbridge doesn't crash. And making fade in and out points of a sample is pretty handy. You have an unlimited number of tracks and you can use your own plugins. There are also stock effect plugins in the DAW, but I couldn't find any instrument plugins. My MIDI keyboard was automatically detected and I had it working in no time. If you wondered if sidechaining is possible, yes it is. So nothing is standing in your way to make your first hit with Soundbridge. All in all, this DAW is pretty complete and has enough features to get you started and even grow as a music producer. Definitely check this one out. Before I go on to number 1 best free DAW, consider subscribing if you already haven't. I'll learn you everything you need to know about music production. The first place, best free DAW, is reserved for Reaper. Well, on their website they say it's a 60-day trial. But since the software relies on the system clock to determine the date, yes, you can easily fake it. And indeed, it seems to work past the 60-day period. So, it's also usable in 2037 with a 6,403 days trial. Okay, technically it's not free, but when you click the next screen away, you can use it without limitations. Let's look at the loops. The tracks are in the middle, the mixer is on the bottom of the screen and the transport controls are in the middle, just above the mixer. The plugins are added in separate windows, and the sample browser, called the Media Explorer, is a bit hidden, but it's there. There is a piano roll in Reaper, but it's in a separate screen with a weird scroll mechanic. Up and down scrolling zooms in and out, and scrolling over the on-screen music keyboard actually scrolls the screen. In Reaper there is no distinction between track types. So a MIDI track, an audio track, a video track and a bus track, those are all the same thing. I have to say I'm surprised by the amount of features and flexibility that Reaper offers. Although they have gone a tad overboard with all the iconless menus and options. This is pretty intimidating for a new user, but a lot of options are pretty self-explanatory when you know the basics of a DAW. Nevertheless, I could pretty much click around in the DAW and get stuff done without watching 10 tutorials. My MIDI keyboard is supported and freezing tracks works smoothly. The sound clip operations are really easy. Extending a clip beyond its limits makes a loop that you can cut and manipulate one part that doesn't affect the other parts. Automation works okay, but it's not my favorite. You have to select the automation lanes. But with some plugins like FabFilter, there is so much you can automate, it fills the entire screen. Exporting can be done in a ton of formats: WAV, AIFF, MP3 and OGG-Vorbis. Sidechaining is possible, but it's a bit complicated. You have to send it via numbered channels instead of selecting a named channel that you want the input from. I'm also surprised by the amount of plugin standards they support. Even ARA is supported, that allows real-time audio file manipulation for example, pitch correcting software like Melodyne. The categorization of plugins is a blessing if you have a ton of plugins. You can search for plugins and even search in categories for plugins. And you can easily stack instrument plugins on top of each other without using an instrument rack or whatever. Although I'm pretty positive, I do have a few minor complaints. The left and right scrolling is inverted. That is somewhat annoying because every other application on the Mac it works the other way around. The font size is really small and I couldn't find out how to enlarge it. After a day of producing or late in the evening, this is gonna be an issue for me. Also, I don't like the multiple window approach. I would have liked to see a one-screen layout. But other than that, Reaper is a solid DAW that is feature-rich and definitely competes with the big professional DAWs. Even for $60 you can't complain. And I can see why people are so enthusiastic about the software.